The North was desperately trying to restore the Union. That was their overall goal of the war. That was Abraham Lincoln's overall goal. They had to invade the South and force those states that had seceded to give up, which is a hard thing to do. Their original aim was not to defeat slavery, okay? This is a speech from Abraham Lincoln, an excerpt from his speeches and writings. So he said, if I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all of the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. So his whole point was just that he wanted to restore the Union however possible. If it meant slavery existed, okay. If it wasn't going to exist, if it existed in some places, that was irrelevant, at least at the beginning of the war. He was just trying to save the Union. So the Confederate strategies were to hold as much of their territory as possible, to not lose any ground. This is the other thing they were trying to do. They were trying to win the support of Britain and France, because Britain and France relied on them for cotton, for them to trade, export cotton to them. And so they figured that if because that got disrupted, maybe they could put pressure on the British and the French to convince the North, hey, you've got to stop because we need our cotton. The Union strategy was called the Anaconda Plan. Who knows what an anaconda is? You. Yeah. Yeah, it wraps around a snake that wraps around its prey and squeezes it to death. So it comes at it from all sides, all angles, and completely smothers it. So that was the plan of the Union, basically. They knew they had to come and just completely smother the South and win. Yes? What's the name of the other dude I was talking about?
Martin Luther King. No, it wasn't.
No?
Is it? Was it?
One more, then we got to move on.
Is it General Winfield Scott?
No, it wasn't General Winfield Scott. Keep thinking on it. We'll talk about it at the end. So this is the Anaconda Plan, okay? They're trying to come at the South from all sides because they know that's the only way they're going to win. So they wanted to close southern ports, so they were keeping supplies, and they were preventing also the South from being able to export cotton. And they wanted to gain control of the Mississippi River, because that was going to cut the Confederacy in half. And the Mississippi River was a main way of how they would get supplies, how you can travel supplies. And they also wanted to capture the Confederate capital, which was Richmond, Virginia. They figured if they did all that, they would win. So, based on those two plans, this is the Anaconda Plan. They're going to totally smother them. And then you've got the Confederacy who thought, we're going to just keep as much of our territory as possible, and we're going to rely on Britain and France, and we're going to tell them, hey, you guys, you're not going to get any cotton, put pressure on the North to stop. Who do you think had the better strategy? The North? Why do you think so? Well, it sounds to me, look, the Confederacy had two things going on, and the Anaconda Plan was a much more total, it was a bigger plan. They had a lot more strategies. It was more comprehensive. So this is what I want you guys to think about. Remember, I want you to keep thinking about whether or not you would be a soldier if there was a civil war. These are who the soldiers were. Because this was a civil war right here in American soil, this wasn't Americans going overseas to Afghanistan or going over to Iraq or anything like that. They were fighting right here. You had brothers, literally, there would be brothers that lived a little, just over the border, and this brother was fighting for the Union, this brother was fighting for the Confederacy. Neighbors fighting against neighbors. The average soldier, like I said, was, he was in his mid-20s, but there were thousands of soldiers under 18, and you even had some that were 14. They came from all parts of the country, everybody in the country wanted to participate, but most of them were from farms. So by the summer of 1861, the Confederate Army had 112,000 soldiers. Have you guys heard that term, rebels?
Yes.
Have you heard of rebels and Yankees? So they were called the rebels. But look at the Union. They already have more soldiers. They have 187,000, and they're called Yankees. Matthew, Malachi. By the end of the war, you got 900,000 men that fought for the Confederacy and 2.1 million that fought for the Union. I mean, just think that's like 3 million people that fought in this war. And think about then, this is how many years ago? So there's, the population wasn't nearly as big as it is now. So just like it said earlier, about 2% of the country's population participated in this war. So with all those people fighting, there were thousands of casualties, they overwhelmed medical centers, and by the end of the war, 600,000 Americans lost their lives. It's more than any war combined, which to me blows my mind, especially since, like I said, the population is so much bigger now. So to think about the fact that this one war had that many people. So just quickly, you saw some of the battles in the video. But the first battle was called Bull Run, and it took place in Northern Virginia, near Washington, D.C., which is in the north, right? But it's very close also to the Confederacy capital. It's in that border state area. And the South won, which was a huge hit to the Union, and it made them realize this isn't going to be as easy as we thought. But then the Union won the battle over the Mississippi and its tributaries. Who knows what tributaries means? No, it's not. It's a noun. It's, think about it, the Mississippi River and its tributaries. Kind of, it's the smaller rivers that feed into the Mississippi, is what it is. Then there was the Battle of Antietam. This is when the Confederate troops moved into Maryland, which is in the north. This is when they're trying to push up into the north. And they were hoping to then push further into Pennsylvania. You guys, knock it off. They were trying to move further into Pennsylvania and then further into the northern states. The Union won, which was a really big victory because it deterred the South. Here they come, they're trying to invade the North, and it did not work. It was also the deadliest day of fighting. 6,000 soldiers died in one day. What does the Emancipation Proclamation mean? What does the word emancipation mean? Just the word alone, emancipation. Zakaria?
Be by yourself.
To be by yourself? That's close though. You're on the right track.
Who said no?
Sorry. A group? No, not quite. I mean, what does the Emancipation Proclamation mean? It's a decree that freed all enslaved people in rebel territory. So what would emancipated mean?
Let go.
Free. Yeah. So emancipate means to be free. So the Constitution didn't allow President Lincoln, didn't give him the right to end slavery. He didn't have the right to just say, yeah, I'm ending slavery. But it did give him the power to take away property from an enemy. And since the Union was the Union, and that's who Abraham Lincoln was the president of, the Confederacy was the enemy. He was allowed to take property, which meant he was able to say that he was freeing the slaves. It didn't change the lives of enslaved people overnight, but it had a strong impact because it declared that slavery was wrong. Remember the Dred Scott verdict?
Yeah.
No.
Remember how it did the opposite. The Dred Scott verdict said the opposite. It said that slaves are property. The Constitution reinforces slavery. It reinforces being allowed to have property, and so it really deterred like the North and the abolitionists. The Emancipation Proclamation did the exact opposite of that. It made people think that, okay, the government is actually saying slavery is wrong. And now it meant, and this is why I think a lot of people think of the Civil War as it was about slavery, because at this point, now towards the end, it did mean that if the Union won, it was going to mean that slavery was over. Yeah?
Well, I got a question. So when you said that the slaves got free, and then you said about Dred Scott, after they got free, did he feel the type of way? 'Cause
Dred Scott, remember, he was free briefly, but he came back and they wouldn't let him be free. And they ruled that he couldn't be free.
so
Because
did
he was still in
eventually
the
be
state.
free?
Hmm?
After everybody got free?
He had already died.
Oh.
He died a few months after that ruling. So no, he never got to live through the Emancipation Proclamation and slaves actually being free. So we're almost through, guys. This is the turning point of the war. It was the Battle at Gettysburg. It was the largest battle in the Western Hemisphere. What does hemisphere mean? The edge? What? One half of the globe. Malachi for the win. And so in Gettysburg, over 100,000 people died in 3 days. And that was it. That was the last time that the South tried to invade the North. And this is just a clip from, I'm sorry, I keep standing in front of you, from the Gettysburg Address. This is like a famous quote. These dead shall not have died in vain. Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. What does it mean? What does that phrase mean, in vain?
Like,
Someone was saying it right here, yeah? Yeah, for nothing. And he's saying, no, that's not going to be. What is government? Have you guys heard that before? Of the people, by the people, for the people?
Yes. Pharaoh.
You go ahead. I know what you want to say. Not you, Malachi, you.
No, the preamble.
Yeah.
The preamble.
They
don't say we.
It reminds me of Fubu. Okay. Yeah, for us, by us. I don't know. There's something with that phrase, like of the people, by the people, for the people. That's basically the So it was 4 years. Remember, it was 1861 to 1865. After 4 very, very bloody years, the Civil War ended and the South was defeated. And it ended with Lee surrendering to Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse. And that was the end of the Civil War.
Yay.
So, I want you guys to do 2 things. One, I want, thank you. I want you to think about and write down, first of all, write down, share out, and then we're going to share out whether or not you would or wouldn't serve in the Civil War if there was one today. And you got to say why or why not. Yes, write that down. And then we're just going to do this, this is a crossword puzzle that wraps up a lot of the people terms that we've been going over. Just something that'll help summarize stuff for you when I know it's end of the year. Nothing too stressful for you.
Can I try?
Oh, you know how to do it. You'll be fine. I'll get it for you just a second, actually.
And can I put it away?
I'll do both. Use your textbook, but I want you to try to work alone. Thank you. And I still haven't gotten my answer. What person? No, that's a very good answer, though. You get to be kidding. That's definitely a famous white male abolitionist. But it wasn't the picture. It wasn't the guy that I was thinking of. It wasn't the picture.
What'd she say?
She said John Brown. That's a very, very, very good answer. It doesn't happen to be who I was asking about.
It was Martin.
It wasn't Martin Van Buren.
I remember that word. Stanford. James Polk.
Stop shouting out. Think about it, and later on, we'll see if anyone gets it. This one's right.
Andrew Jackson?
Oh, okay.
No.
Yes.
Do you have anything
Do I have anything you can write with?
Harper's Ferry.
Hmm?
It's in your pocket.
Harper's Ferry. Harper's Ferry is a place, not a person. Does anybody have anything that Malachi can write with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blood. That's what my people told me. Pick me and write the blood.
Hey, we have some.
How you gonna make your finger? Yeah, so.
White safety.
Let's look right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's just take like 20 minutes to work on the crossword puzzle, because then I want to wrap up and I want to talk about the